Cross.
Detective Duncan, when did you become the case agent?
I believe it was June of 2020.
Okay. And prior to you being the case agent, it was Detective Moffett?
Moffett, yes.
Is that correct? And was it because he got promoted that they made you the case agent over this case? or-
Yes.
Okay. And he's now a lieutenant, is that correct?
Yes, he is.
Okay. And so he was the case, was there anyone in between? Was he the case agent the whole time until 2020 when you took over?
Correct.
Okay. And when you took over the case, what things did you do differently?
I wouldn't say differently. I continued what I was doing. I was looking at records for him. The records in this case, as you're aware, there's volumes of records. So continued to look at all of the independent iCloud records, call detail records, phone extractions, and also kind of reviewing what he had done prior to my assignment is what I'd done.
Right, so kind of reviewing and seeing what you need to look at.
Correct.
So is this, from what I was understanding what you were saying earlier, is this, you weren't really involved in the case since July 11th and now you're back involved in the case?
So July 11th, obviously, I was there at the house.
Right.
Shortly after that, I had another homicide and my time was occupied with that. And it was several months later that I offered to help look at records because they were so much. And I'd always done that kind of in the background, but never really took a deep dive into them until that June 2020.
Okay, but you were kind of involved, so you kind of knew what was going on in the investigation during those,
Somewhat.
during that time, that year in between,
yeah.
before you became the case agent?
Correct.
But not totally deep dive, but you kind of knew what was going on?
I understood it.
Okay.
Yes.
That's good. So let's go over that day again real quick when you were there. What time were you there at the scene, from when to when?
I believe I arrived shortly after 9:15.
Okay.
And I would have left probably 4:30.
Okay. Were you at the house that whole time?
Yes.
So
Well,
you didn't.
let me back up.
Oh, I'm sorry, go
I
ahead.
did leave for a short period of time to obtain a saw that we would need to cut that piece of flooring out and the baseboard.
Okay.
But then it came back, yes.
So you were at the scene that whole time, besides the time you went to get the saw?
Correct.
You didn't go to the Chandler Police Department?
No.
So you weren't there during our interviews?
No.
Okay. So, and you had mentioned something about you couldn't go in, I was confused. You couldn't go in until after the search warrant, but you were in before that, right?
No. So obviously your first responders, your police officers, the firefighters, they're going in to preserve life and treat the victim in this case. Then they back out. At that point, we will not let anybody in, given the circumstances of this case, until a search warrant is actually signed and executed. So we will wait outside the threshold of the house until that search warrant is signed, and then we will begin our investigation.
So I'm still confused. So you didn't go into the house until after the search warrant, or you did get to go in beforehand?
No, I didn't go in before. I waited until after the search warrant.
Okay. So you had testified, I'm still confused, sorry.
I'm going to object again to the defendant testifying.
Just ask the question.
You had also indicated that you had gone in and that Charles was on the floor. Is that correct?
I think the question was asked of me is, what did I see when I went in? And so that, and I would say after the search warrant we went in, that's what I saw.
But he was already gone in the ambulance at that point?
He never went in an ambulance.
Charles didn't go in the ambulance?
No, he went with the medical examiner's office.
So what time did he leave?
I can't give you a specific time on that. I have to look at the medical examiner's office information for that.
But it was after you entered at 11:50?
Yes, it was way after that.
Okay. So then when you entered, what did you do at that point? Can you kind of walk me through that?
Yeah, so when I entered, obviously I made my general observations about what I saw in that room and of the body. And then talked with Detective Coons about what needed to be done next.
And what did you guys do next?
So we came up with a game plan as far as how to process the scene, which direction, who was going to do what. Like I indicated, I was tasked with collecting that firearm and was also tasked with kind of looking through the house for any kind of blood evidence that might be present. The other task that I had, when we were ready, I contacted the medical examiner's office to report the death to them.
What time about was that call, do you think?
I do not know.
But sometime in between that, before 4:30, is that correct?
Correct.
And did everyone leave the scene at 4:30? Is that kind of the timing when people were clearing out, or?
Yeah, some might have stayed behind, and a lot of our ID techs like to sit in their cars and type their notes, that type of thing. But right around that 4:30, 4:45 is when the search warrant was completed.
Okay. And then there had been a walkthrough, is that correct?
Yes.
And so Alex had come back to the house just after 3-ish?
I believe that could have been the time, yes.
Okay. And then were you present during the walkthrough?
I was.
And who else was present?
Detective Moffitt, Detective Werther, Detective Coons, myself, and I want to say crime scene technician Jordan might have been there as well.
Okay. And was it Jordan that was wearing a body cam? Was there a body cam made of that?
No, I believe that Detective Werther had a body cam, but it malfunctioned and didn't capture.
So there's no recording of that at all?
No.
And Detective Moffitt was the case agent at that point, right? Because he had been assigned that already?
Yes.
Okay. And so did each of you write reports on that walkthrough then, since there was no recording of it?
That would have all been included in our report, not a specific walkthrough report, but in our original narrative, yes.
Everyone would talk about it, mention it, their perspective?
Not everybody has to, as long as somebody or one or two people wrote about it to know that it happened. Yeah.
Right. So since there's no recording of it, though, someone is assigned, like, because Moffitt is the case agent, or who would do that? Be assigned to include it in the report, for sure?
It's different. I'll give you the example. If you look at probably my report compared to Detective Coons' report, you might notice, similarities in there. You might notice stuff that I went into more detail on, or he went into more detail. But it depends on whether they write it or not. They could just put something as simple, I was present during a walkthrough.
Okay. So since you became the case agent, have you read all the reports?
At one time or another, yes, I have.
So is there anyone specific that kind of ran through what happened at the walkthrough?
Your Honor, I object to asked and answered and relevance. And hearsay.
Sustained as to asked and answered.
Did you write about it in your report?
I'm going to object again to relevance, hearsay, asked and answered.
Sustained as to asked and answered. He already answered that.
You mentioned that it was Detective Werther who had the body cam, is that correct?
Again, asked and answered.
So
Sustained.
did you read his report?
I have read his report, yes.
Did he mention the walkthrough and what happened?
And I'm going to object again to relevance, hearsay, and asked and answered.
To the extent that it would call for a hearsay answer, I'll sustain the objection.
Detective, when you became the case agent, you were kind of aware, so you knew what had been done in the investigation, is that correct?
Yes,
And so you knew who had been interviewed, is that correct?
yes,
And you knew what had been tested or not tested at that point?
correct.
So the bat was tested for fingerprints. We learned that in the testimony, is that correct?
Correct.
And the results were inconclusive.
Correct.
And so there were no latent prints were identified. That's correct.
Correct.
And there were prints, but we just don't know whose they were. Is that accurate?
Sounds about right, yes.
Now, we learned that the bat was swabbed for DNA and sent to the lab. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was that ever tested?
No, it was not.
And why not?
When making this decision, you have to look at the probative value of that and what that would show or what a test would prove. DNA and fingerprints are not time specific. That bat was owned by Tylee, to our knowledge. It was in a household where you lived. It was in a household where Alex was. And at one point, based on the fact of when we understood the bat to have been purchased, Charles was living in the house as well. So that bat was accessible to all those people. So if at one point during that time that person touched that bat, all that it would be saying is that somebody touched that bat at some point, not during this incident.
Right. But there was no blood found on the bat, is that correct?
Correct.
But would that be able to be told from DNA?
There was nothing that was visible that could see, like if blood dries or anything like that. There was nothing that would indicate that here's a spot we need to test for that particular, for blood.
Right, but would DNA tell if there was blood? Could they find out if there was blood on the bat from the DNA test?
Once again, blood is, you would see if it dries and crusts, then you would see that particular blood. DNA comes in many forms. It can come in touch, it can come in sweat, blood, but you would think that blood would be visible at that point to be able to test. And we did not see anything like that.
Okay, so if there was none of Alex's DNA on the blood, wouldn't that tell us something? I mean, on the bat at all, then wouldn't that tell us something?
If there were none of Alex's, it would just mean that Alex never touched that bat at any time.
And wouldn't it tell us that Alex was never hit in the head with that bat?
Once again, it's not specific. I can't, if there was blood on the bat, then yes, we would test for that. But there's no visible blood on the bat.
I understand that, but when you're doing an investigation, are you not trying to figure out what happened?
Yes, and that's what we
Don't
did.
you want all the information to do that?
Yes.
And so whose responsibility would it be to request the DNA testing from the swab that was taken?
Once again, that would just show, it's not showing that it's blood. There's no blood on the bat. It was just showing that a DNA swab was taken of that particular area to be able to test later on. But there's no discoloration that would show any kind of blood.
And who in the Chandler Police Department would be requesting that DNA to be tested? Who would have to do that?
That'd
is
be
my
me.
question. It would be you?
As the new case agent, that would be me, or Detective Moffat at the beginning.
And so Detective Moffat never did that, is that correct?
Correct.
And you never did that, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if Charles' DNA was on the bat, then wouldn't that tell us something also?
Did he touch the bat at some point?
Yeah, that he took it from Tylee, like she said in her interview.
And I'm going to object and move to
Sustained.
strike that.
The jury should disregard that last question. That information is not in evidence.
Detective, wouldn't that have answered some questions for us in your investigation?
I don't think it would have, no.
Okay. We learned that the gun in testimony, that the gun was tested just last month, is that correct?
Correct.
And who requested that test?
I did.
And why did you request that test?
So on firearms, immediately after we have a firearm case, we have the ability to utilize a system called NIBIN. NIBIN is run through the ATF, and what NIBIN will do is we can fire a particular firearm that we have control over and obtain casings from those. We could then take the casings from the scene casings and then compare those together. We already knew that that gun fired those casings very early in the investigation, as a NIBIN report provided. However, ATF will not testify in court. So playing the balancing game of when a trial will begin and whether a trial will even happen, I do not like to make more work for a firearm analyst than I have to. So when we know that we are in and going to trial, then I will send that over to them because they were the ones that will testify to that.
Okay. So it wasn't after my investigator suggested that none of the guns had been tested
No,
that you
no.
ordered that test?
I never spoke to your investigator about that either.
Okay. So, Detective, when did the Chandler Police Department take possession of the gun?
On July 11th?
And then it was tested in March, is that correct?
Correct.
And then we've established through expert testimony of Detective Coons that the floorboard was not tested either, is that correct?
Correct.
And he also established that the projectile was not tested either, is that correct?
Correct.
And Detective Coons also confirmed that no tests were done on my husband's shirt, is that correct?
Correct.
And then when you became the case agent on this case, why didn't you request any of these tests?
Because I was confident that based on the medical examiner's report of an entry wound to the lower left quadrant, an exit wound to the upper left rear shoulder, and a corresponding defect, or what I would refer to as a bullet strike in the floor, if you take those 3 points and match them up, then there's no other explanation other than Charles was laying on the ground at that time.
So the medical examiner said he could not say that he was laying on the ground for sure, but you're saying that in your detective opinion, you know that for sure?
I believe so, yes.
And so were you there to witness it with your eyes?
No.
Law enforcement on July 11th, 2019?
I can't speak to that, no.
Did we answer all the questions asked to us?
I have nothing to say you didn't.
Did we follow all directions given to us by law enforcement that day?
I'm going to object to speculation and foundation as to how this detective knows that. He's already said he wasn't at the station.
He's the case agent, Your Honor.
He can testify to what he observed for himself, so if you want to tailor your question, go ahead.
Would you say that according to every report and every detective that you've talked to and anything else, that you would say that we fully complied with law enforcement that day on July 11th, 2019?
Object to hearsay.
I'm going to sustain the objection to the form that it was asked.
So according to all the reports that have been given by everyone who was there, and you're the case agent, so you're in charge of all of these people, is that correct?
I'm not in charge of them, but I have read the reports.
So you have read the reports,
Yeah.
and as far as you know, to your knowledge, We fully cooperated with law enforcement that day on July 11th, 2019?
And again, object to hearsay. And lack of personal knowledge.
Sustained.
Has it come to your knowledge that we did not comply with everything?
And I would object to the exact same thing, lack of personal knowledge and hearsay.
He can answer that question.
Can you ask that again?
Have you come to the knowledge that we did not comply that day for any reason?
I have not.
Okay. Did I turn my husband's phone over when asked?
Yes.
Did Alex turn his phone over willingly?
I am not sure when Alex, or if Alex turned his phone on. I'm not aware of that.
Okay. So is there a body cam where his phone was placed into an evidence bag? That's correct.
I do remember seeing that, yes.
And then the evidence bag is put into the front of the police car where he was taken to the Chandler Police Department. Is that correct?
I didn't see that, but I trust the fact that it was taken at that time, yes.
And so, according to that body cam, it looked like he turned it over on request.
And I'm going to object to speculation.
You don't have any knowledge that he didn't, is that correct?
I'll allow that last question.
I don't have knowledge, no.
Okay. So do you know who had taken possession of his phone at that point?
I don't.
Do you know who drove him to the Chandler Police Department?
Well, through this hearing, Officer Krautheim.
Oh, that's right. The one I couldn't remember how to spell. I mean,
Again, Your Honor.
Sustained, please don't testify.
was a copy of Alex's phone made by the Chandler Police Department?
I don't know.
You don't know?
There's so much information. I don't know whether we received just his call detail records or an actual copy was made. I don't know.
So you're the case agent.
Yeah, I'd have to look and see if that was the case.
So you're the case agent, and you don't know if the person who shot my husband's phone was ever.
Yeah, at this moment, I don't recall.
So there's no Cellbrite of it. Is that correct? In the discovery?
I think the only thing that we have is his call detail records, which would be from his cellular provider.
So what would the typical protocol be for you to, if someone handed over their phone, wouldn't it be to do a digital download of it?
So that can be one of two ways. It could be under a search warrant to do that, or it can be under consent to do that. I do not believe I don't believe that his phone was extracted at that time.
So he would have to give consent? Is that what you're saying?
Or a search warrant, but that would have been through Detective Moffat.
So Detective Moffat would have had to get a search warrant and then he would download it?
Based on their conversation, whether Alex would be willing to do that or whether a search warrant was needed, but that was Detective Moffat's call at that time.
And he decided not to do that?
I don't know what his process is or his thought process.
Well, I'm saying that he did not do that, and you're the case agent now, so you would know if that was done, correct?
You're asking me to speak for Detective Moffat, whether it was done or not?
No, I'm asking you to speak as a case agent now if you know if it was done or not.
I believe it was not.
Okay. Do you think that would be important to your investigation?
Absolutely, knowing what we know now, yes.
Okay, you're a detective, right?
Correct.
You have to look at all the angles, right?
Correct.
You don't know what happened, right? You just stated that you weren't there, right?
Correct.
So wouldn't that be crucial information that the police department didn't bother to take?
Once again, I don't know what the conversation with Detective Moffat and Alex was and what his reasoning for not. Would I have taken it? Yes.
But that was not your call at the time.
Correct.
And so in lieu of that, what did you do to try to obtain that information?
We got his call detail records through his company.
And so is it safe to say that it's much better to have the actual phone to do the extraction so that you can have everything that was on the phone?
Yeah, but you can also obtain a lot of that stuff through other means, through iCloud records, Google records. But yeah, it is nice to have that phone.
So would you call that an oversight by Detective Moffett?
Object to speculation.
Sustained.
So was the phone then returned to Alex that day?
Yes,
How did that happen? Was it just handed to him or?
I'm not sure.
Okay. And that would have also been Detective Moffat's call.
Correct.
And we haven't heard from Detective Moffat, is that correct?
Correct.
So according to your knowledge, that when Alex was called by Chandler Police to return to the scene for the walkthrough by detectives, he did so, is that correct?
Yes, he did.
You saw him there?
Yes.
And did he answer everyone's questions while you were there, that you observed?
Yes, he did. There was very little questioning. It was just more of a positional type thing. It was, where were you?
It was more, I'm sorry, I missed that last part.
Where was he? Where was he standing during the time?
Oh. And so he kind of walked it through with you, and all four of you were there, right? Or
Yes.
5. And no one was asking him any questions?
Your Honor, I'm going to, again, we've already gone through this before, asked and answered, as well as verging on hearsay.
I'm going to sustain the objection. How much do you have left on your cross, you would think?
I don't know, Your Honor. A lot.
In other words, more than a couple minutes, should we take our afternoon break?
Oh, yes, we should
right.
take a break.
Let's take our afternoon break for staff. It'll be about 15 minutes. Please remember the admonition. Cross-examination of this witness.
Detective Duncan, in all those text messages, we saw a lot of people. Did you interview our mother, Janice Cox?
I did not.
Did you read or watch her interview?
I have not.
Did you interview our sister, Summer Shiflett?
I did not.
Did you read or watch her interview?
No.
Did you interview our father, Barry Cox?
No.
Did you read or watch his interview?
No.
So the only source that you have for this investigation of the shooter in your case is through our brother Adam? Is that correct?
And all of the contacts mentioned through your iClouds.
Yeah, but you didn't ask anybody who was mentioned in there or who was speaking in there what they meant by any of those text messages?
Well, none of the people that you mentioned were present during this incident. So you're asking about the actual day of July 11th, if I asked them about that day, or about the text messages?
About the text messages themselves. Like, did you ask my mother what she meant in that text message when she wrote it?
No.
Did you ask my sister what she meant in those text messages?
No.
Did you ask Melanie, my niece, what she meant in those text messages?
No.
Did you ask me what I meant in those text messages?
I couldn't.
Okay. And through your investigation, you found out that, as you testified earlier, that Alex wouldn't text or call Adam back. Is that correct?
I'm not interpreting as far as he wouldn't do it. What I'm saying is I don't see it. So if there's a message there and there's a text, there's no indication that there was a call back or a text back.
So it looked like that he wasn't calling him or texting him back, even though he was getting calls and texts. Is that correct?
And then Adam also testified that he did not receive a call or a text back,
So
which would
the-
be consistent with the records.
So the only person in our family, in our whole family, that you got information from was the estranged brother from our family who didn't know what was going on with everybody else.
I object to the form of the question. Argumentative.
Well, it's also compound. I'll sustain the objection.
Okay, so Adam, our estranged brother, is the only one that you got information from, is that correct?
And I object to the form of the question.
Sustained.
So is this your normal protocol to just talk to one witness and not all the others?
No.
Why didn't you speak to any other member of my family?
A lot of members of the family have been spoken to.
But you were not privy to any of that information as the case agent?
Well, I was privy to the interviews that were conducted by other detectives.
And you just testified to me that you didn't read or watch any of those interviews. Is that correct?
I have been present during an interview or a phone call with Summer, and been present during a phone call in this process, but I have never interviewed them.
How many interviews has Summer had with the police departments?
Objection, speculation.
If you know.
He can answer if he knows.
I don't know.
More than one or two?
I don't know.
Okay, but you knew of at least one,
That Summer has had?
correct?
Yes.
But you didn't ask her any of these questions or any of the questions about the text messages that you just talked about that were on the screen with Summer?
I said no.
Okay. So as the case agent and a detective, do you form a suspicion and then stick to it and only investigate the things that lead you to that same conclusion?
No.
You had testified earlier about the story of Nephi, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said that you researched it, is
I
that
did.
correct? What research did you do?
Well, the very basic research. I Googled who is Nephi. What does Nephi stand for? I've also, through this process over the last 4 or 5 years, have asked other members of the church just a simple question: tell me about Nephi. And every single person I talk to tells me that same story that was told by Adam.
So are you aware that there's 15 books in the Book of Mormon?
I am not.
Are you aware that 4 of those books are books of Nephi?
I am not.
That there's Nephi 1, 1st Nephi, 2nd Nephi, 3rd Nephi, 4th Nephi?
No, I'm not.
Okay. That there's many stories of Nephi. Is that correct? Or you don't know?
I don't know.
So the very first story is the story that,
And I'm going to object to testifying.
It sounds like that's the way it was going, so please just ask questions.
so you did not read the Book of Mormon?
No.
You did not read 1st Nephi?
No.
You just asked people. That was your research?
I asked members of that particular church, and I also did an internet search, yes.
So you did an internet search, and it gave you all the stories of Nephi?
That's the story that came up.
So how long did you do that research for?
I couldn't tell you.
So in your research, did you discover that there's about 25 stories of Nephi in that Book of Mormon?
I didn't see that, no.
And that there's 4 different prophets that are called Nephi in the Book of Mormon?
I'm going to again object as to testifying, and the detective has already indicated, so asked and answered.
I'll overrule the objection. He can ask if he knows that or not.
What was the question? Sorry.
I'm sorry, I can't remember. Can the court reporter tell
There's
us?
4 different people referred to as Nephi.
Yeah, 4 different prophets in the Book of Mormon that are Nephi. Are you aware of that?
No.
Okay. So isn't it true that you really have no idea what I was referring to when I referenced Nephi in my text message?
I can only go off of what I see. I can't tell you what you're thinking or what you're trying to relay there. But based on my knowledge and based on talking to people about who is Nephi, that is a story that came up consistently.
You relayed to the jury that it was in order to kill. You relayed to the jury,
I said that the story was the same story and similar to Adam told.
okay, and you said it earlier, that that was in order to kill, that I referenced Nephi. I will be like Nephi and you will be like Nephi. To the jury here today.
Ask a question. That's a statement, not a question.
Do you have knowledge that my text message meant that at all?
No.
Are you aware through all of your investigation of this case that my brother was a stand-up comedian, Alex?
I had heard that, yes.
And that everything is a joke to Alex?
I can't speak for that.
So when you're interpreting all these text messages and making all these assumptions, half of them could be jokes and you would not know that?
Objection, speculation.
Sustained.
Were you speculating when you read my text messages?
I think I'm just reading your text messages. I don't think I was drawing any inference from them. I was just simply reading them.
Well, today you were explaining them to the jury. Is that true?
Those were read. There was no explanation as to what it meant.
As the case agent, what is your communication with the other investigators in this case?
What do you mean by other investigators?
So who is on your team? Who is working for you on this case right now?
I'm the only person working on the case right now. Back in the, when we were investigating it, it would have been myself and Detective Coons. And then periodically we'd have Detective Werther do some work for us if we needed it.
And then do you guys communicate through emails or calls or text messages, or how does that work?
Well, unfortunately, we're cramped in a small little area, so we have the ability to just talk to each other.
So no reports are really made of that communication, you're just talking?
Correct.
In being a detective, is your job basically to be an investigator and search out facts concerning what happened?
Yes,
Do you feel like you've done that in this case?
I do.
So by not testing any of those things, you feel like you've done everything you could possibly do to tell the jury and to tell us what happened that day on July 11th, even though you weren't present?
Correct.
You're confident in that?
I'm confident.
Did you have to meet with Detective Moffett to review the case when you made this transfer?
No.
So he didn't give you any heads up on what was happening?
Well, before he left, he just dropped the case notebook on my desk and then went on his way. We have
So-
had conversations before then and since, but nothing in detail.
So you didn't say what's been tested or what hasn't been tested
No, that's for me to go back through and look at.
through reports?
Correct.
Okay. So did you think it was important to maybe luminol the bat?
Once again, there was no visual blood present on the bat, and we decided that we were not going to do that particular process.
So can't blood be invisible and still be on the bat if you luminol it?
I guess if it's cleaned off, it would still maybe show some proteins, but that was something we decided not to do. We fingerprinted it to show, because there was indication that Charles had grabbed it from Tylee, so we did our best evidence to try to grab that location where it would have been grabbed, but that's what we did.
Wouldn't that be important to your investigation?
Objection as to wouldn't what?
Yeah, please.
Wouldn't luminoling the bat be important to this investigation, this particular investigation?
I don't believe it would.
What about luminoling the gun? Was that done?
Once again, there's no visible, and there was We were under the impression that it happened 5 minutes before we got there, and there's no visible presence of blood on the bat.
Well, you went around the whole entire house looking for blood, is that correct?
Yes,
And you had the gun in your possession,
yes.
and you're in a police station.
I was at your house.
I'm saying you have access as the case agent to have any of these things tested, is that not right?
Yes,
So why didn't you test them?
because I did not think that luminol was needed to be tested because there was no visual blood.
So wouldn't you like to know that for sure?
I guess we make choices and we make decisions through this process based on the facts that we have and the facts that are presented to us. And based on the facts presented to us and what we saw and what we had, I did not feel that was necessary.
You have charged me with a crime, is that correct?
I have not, no.
You have helped them charge me with a crime, is that correct? The state of Arizona?
I conducted an investigation and I sent it forward, yes.
And you did not feel it was necessary to test any of these things?
Objection, Your
As
Honor.
the case
Asked
agent.
and answered like 4 times.
Sustained.
What logical reason do you have as an investigator to not investigate all of these things that were available to you for the past 5 years?
Your Honor, I'm again going to object to asked and answered. If there's a specific thing that hasn't been asked,
That's a really very broad question. I'll sustain the objection. Yeah.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Detective, I'm going to start by just talking to you a little bit about luminol. Is luminol a process used where you believe a scene has been cleaned up, like somebody actually attempted to remove blood from the scene, and so it's been diluted?
Correct, and it would show the remaining proteins left, yes.
And it's so luminol is used when there is no visible blood because the scene's cleaned.
Correct.
And so, in this case, you were under the impression that this homicide had occurred 5 minutes before police arrived?
Yes,
So you would not be expecting a cleaned up scene.
correct.
But you did look to see if you saw visible blood.
We did, yes,
And by visible blood, you're talking about drops of blood that might be there,
correct,
swipes of blood that might be there,
correct,
hairs from someone's head that might be stuck in the bat.
yes.
And did you see any of that?
No, we did not.
Now, after this, did you learn that there was actually this 47-minute process?
We did,
So when you're processing the scene that day, you were not aware yet of how extensive this timeline was incorrect.
correct,
In fact, we heard from Detective Werther that it was sort of the next day as he started going through the phone from Charles,
yes,
and the day after that as he's going to get videos from Burger King and Walgreens, that you're learning that this timeline is very wrong.
correct.
I want to talk about the data that you have reviewed in this case. When you talk about what was reviewed, whether by you, well, let's just say by you. In these iCloud accounts, are you talking terabytes of data?
Yes, each iCloud account can have terabytes of data, and you have to, and it's tedious because you can only look at one at the time. We can only look at one particular iCloud at a time and go through that, make notes. Then you'd have to shut down, open up another, and look through one iCloud at a time, and then try to, with your notes, to match these together. So it was a very labor-intensive process.
And as you're looking through this, are you then learning more things that then makes you have to go back to the other iCloud account to try to see what you could find in that?
Absolutely.
So when we come in here with just a few documents and a few things, would it be fair to say that's just a grain of what you've gone through.
Absolutely.
So on July 11th of 2019, when you arrive at this scene, you think this homicide just occurred, did you understand at that time the relevance of cell phone or iCloud data?
No, what's something that happened, what sounded like it was a rather quick incident. It just happened 5 minutes ago. I wouldn't think of the necessity for cell phone data, like to show planning or anything like that, or show conversations over the weeks and months. Sometimes we get cases where, oh, this person's had beef with me forever. Obviously, I am going to want to take that phone and go look through that. But in this case, we just had something reported to us that happened just 5 minutes and very limited information, as it was almost an impromptu attack. We had no information at the time that this is something that had weeks, if not months, of planning.
On July 11th of 2019, did you start to see inconsistencies between the statements that were being given, the timeline, and the physical evidence at the scene? Did you start to see some inconsistencies?
Yes.
For instance, you were provided with a self-defense theory. Did you see inconsistencies between that statement and what you're seeing at the scene?
Yes.
And that's where we're talking about the location of the bullet wounds to Charles, the bullet strike under his left shoulder, and the bullet being by his left shoulder for one of those shots.
Correct.
But again, you're still not aware of the background of these individuals.
Correct.
As you began learning more information about the interaction between Charles and Lori Vallow and learned about the individuals, were you then able to obtain information to allow you to write search warrants to even obtain phone records and iCloud accounts?
Yes.
So that's not just something you can be like, hey, I just want that, so I'm just going to ask iCloud for it, and they'll just hand that right over?
Correct. You have to have probable cause in order to get that.
You were asked about DNA and blood, and I think you had said something about it. Is DNA only found in blood?
No.
So saliva can have it,
Correct.
sweat.
Correct.
So when you're asked about blood on the bat, that isn't the only form of DNA that would be left on there potentially.
Correct.
So if you had information that the bat belonged to Tylee, no matter what, you would expect to find her DNA on it.
I would.
Not, regardless of whether she ever bled on it, right?
Correct.
Was blood something different you were looking for, though?
It was.
And was that due to the fact that there's this allegation that Alex Cox was hit in the head with the bat?
Yes.
And so we have the bat here. You looked at it yourself, did
Yep.
not see visible blood,
I did not.
and we have someone else who processed it and didn't see visible blood on it.
Correct.
Even on the edge top of it, do you see any sort of damage to that plastic around the tip of it?
I do not.
If you had processed that bat for DNA and you found Tylee's DNA on that, would you have told you that she put it on there on July 11th? Did they ticky mark that for you?
It would not.
Would just say it was on there, right?
Correct.
Are you able to time that in any way?
No.
When the medical examiner comes out, the medical examiner's office comes out to the scene to collect the body. Body doesn't leave in an ambulance, right?
No, it does not.
They have a van.
Yes.
And does the doctor who's performing the autopsy come out there with you guys and
No,
check out the scene?
He does not.
So when a medical examiner testifies as to a wound being shored, but not knowing what it was against, he's not out at the scene looking at the body, right?
Correct.
He's not out at the scene looking at the projectile defect or on the ground underneath Charles's left shoulder.
Correct.
He's just saying that wound is shored. Whatever he was against is what it was.
Correct.
But you were at the scene,
I was.
and you saw the shoulder in line with that defect on that ground or on that floor that you collected.
Correct.
Now, did you ever have any information that Janice Cox or Barry Cox or Summer Shiflett were present at 5531 South Four Peaks on July 11th?
We did not.
In fact, it appeared that Summer was actually going out of town, so she wasn't going to be around on the 11th.
Correct.
Now, you had mentioned that you were present when Summer and Janice were interviewed. Was that when the state interviewed them when they were listed as witnesses potentially for the defendant?
That is correct.
And in fact, did you recall Summer being asked about her offering her house to the defendant to stay at?
I do.
What we had seen in the text message.
Correct.
Was there anything about that statement that appeared to be untrue based upon your hearing or participating in that?
There's nothing.
In these text messages and iCloud account records, start with Ned. When you first started seeing those, were you understanding the full story of where that came about?
No.
Did you then have to look to other people who, like Serena Sharp or Christina Atwood or others, who were aware of who Ned was?
Correct.
What Ned was?
Yes.
In terms of Nephi, you said that we heard from Adam when he's asked about Nephi, what that meant to him.
Correct.
And he provided us with a story of Nephi and Laban, right?
Correct.
You said you Googled this like many of us do, right? Start out there.
Right.
And then you actually spoke to other members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
I did.
Was that to make sure that you weren't missing something?
It was to make sure that there wasn't another story that might be out there that he's known for. And so, like I said, I would just randomly ask people that. And every single time I would ask that, that was the story that was told to me.
So others who were members of that church spoke the same way that Adam did.
Yes.
You were asked a lot about sort of processing of the scene and processing of the items of evidence. Was this case, let me ask you this, was the physical scene itself inconsistent with what was initially told?
Yes.
And did it require additional research into all of these different iClouds, cell phones, cell tower records to clarify what happened?
Yes, as the weeks and months went on, additional information was learned that basically required those accounts to better understand what took place.
And was that what then you spent months going through?
Right.
And ultimately, after all of that, is when you eventually presented that case or turned it in to be reviewed.
Yes, I did.
I have no other questions, Your Honor.